Jeff Mathias from First Response Solar. I am the training and marketing director over here, and I do a lot of the blog content both for the First Response website as well as my own website for Mathias Energy Consulting. Let me start over there regarding some blogs that I've written. About a month ago, I went to the new Tesla Powerwall 3 training. And I wanted to write a blog comparing it to the Enphase energy storage system and how the two compare. But before I got into any of the detail, I kind of had to go down memory lane. So I wrote this blog talking about string inverters versus microinverters, an 18-year history. And that's when I started the industry back in 2006. And back then we had very little monitoring. Now this blog is going to go into a lot of detail regarding how many kilowatt hours and the good, the bad, and the ugly of both of the storage systems. They both have very different needs. It's kind of like the difference between buying a car and a truck. They both do similar things, but they do them in very different ways. As you would guess, the Tesla Powerwall 3 is an all-in-one device in the DC coupled environment, which means one inverter controls both the energy storage system as well as the modules on the roof, whereas the Enphase has roof inverters and it has inverters for the energy storage system, So as you would guess, the Tesla Powerwall 3 is less expensive since it has a single inverter. But the reason I wrote this 18-year history of inverters is it reminded me of why in the industry over 18 years we have gone from string inverters. A string inverter is hooking multiple modules together into a single string. And microinverters have one microinverter for each module on the roof for each solar panel. And so the reality of it is what we're doing here is we're really trying to get an understanding of how do we tie, what does it look like to have a whole system as one and or individual microinverters. And really when we get into monitoring. And so the video here, I wanted to show that because I think it's important. I think it's one of the biggest differences in terms of the overall system. So let's start over here and we'll go back to First Response. They also have some of the blog postings that could come in handy when you're looking at this. And I do reference them in the blog. One of them is energy storage systems, savings, batteries, and backup. Both Enphase and Tesla do that. And also a little bit about the new Net Billing Tariff, which has really made it so that batteries are needed to be part of every system. But what I wanted to do is pull up and show you a little bit about how some of the different screens work. So first, let's look at Tesla. Tesla, when I look at some of what they got going on, they have a very generic, I'm going to call it opening system here that shows. If you have a Tesla Powerwall, if you have a Tesla car, or if you have a Tesla electric vehicle charger, it'll all show up in the same place. It does require an application, so it will not work via the web for the homeowner. They need to have it on a phone and or an iPad type device. But this is what they look like from an overview of the entire system. Then what we get into is what does the solar look like? Again, it's going to be a solar-based system. And so the solar, this is a monthly graph that shows the monthly data and how we come from month. They also have daily graphs that show it daily, and they show how the different systems work in terms of going to and from the battery. But it's all system level, which means how is a system doing it? There's nothing in here that really relates to the module level. So I'm going to get rid of those, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Enphase. And where Enphase is strong, I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, I went over to a customer site. They called me up, and they were selling their home. And what they wanted from me was to see if the home was working well. So the solar system, because they were going to get ready to sell the house, and they wanted to prove. So I got their monitoring up and running. It had been down. They were an orphan site, which means they did not have an installer. And I got him to pull up the array map on his solar system. Every one of these little blocks is a solar module on the roof, and I can very easily, very quickly see this one wasn't working. So it goes from dark black up to light blue, depending on how much power the system is producing. This is about 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's producing some power. But I can immediately say one module wasn't working. Most likely that's an inverter. So I put him in touch with a solar company. Now, had they been with an installer that was still active, this would have triggered a push to that installer saying this particular site has one bad inverter They would call Enphase, verify it was bad, they'd ship it out, or they might have one in stock and they would go out within a week and replace this inverter. It's a very quick and easy, proactive way to monitor systems. When I was getting up this morning to basically verify this blog, I also just wanted to make sure, did that installer actually fix it? Yep, this is very early in the morning. It's about 8 o'clock. Very little power had been produced, but you can tell that inverter now is producing power. It's up and running, and the module's up and running. So very, very easy to look at. Now, other examples I've seen is where if this is the lower edge of the roof, I would come in and I could see shading. If there was bushes, and go into Google Earth and see, yep, time to cut your bushes back. These 4 modules are really being affected by the shade. Or a couple modules up here might be affected by a chimney. Or this module might be overly affected due to the fact it's near a chimney and the pigeons are getting a hold of it and soiling it. Where Enphase comes in strong is not just in the monitoring, but actually in production. So this one module would probably go completely unnoticed in a system that was doing very generic data. If I can only see the system, I'm not going to be able to see one module was out in that system. When I first took over, I found a customer that had a couple modules that were a third out due to the fact that they had bad diodes. They were Chinese panels, and the diodes are bad, and so they were producing at 2/3. I could tell because the color was different in those 2 modules that were on the roof, and it was very easy visually just to pop and see. And I could go out there and make those changes, thinking first it was the inverters until I did the test and found out it was actually the solar modules as well. Another thing that microinverters do, and I go into this in the blog, is about how they produce more power, especially when you get into issues of shading. And so I don't want to belabor this, but for me, from a support standpoint, a customer support standpoint, this monitoring was over the top incredible. I mean, it just allowed me to walk customers through, but not just the monitoring of the panels. I could also monitor the actual how they produced power. And so I could see very quickly and easily in a graph, the blue beam production and batteries, I could see how they used power. And I can scroll across and get the detailed for that moment in time, but I can see when they're exporting power, and I can come up with ideas of asking them where certain power is being used, making sure that the batteries are being optimized and that the time frames they're using their batteries are optimized. Just a lot more data, a lot more ability to provide overall good customer service to my clients without them having, and they have the availability to look at this too, so they can do it themselves. But it did allow us better customer service when they would call me up and say, hey, it doesn't look like my system's producing as well, my bills are higher. And I could go in and look and say, yeah, we're producing just as much as we did before. What's this big bar over here where we use a lot of power? And they say, oh, that's right, we added an electric car. Or, oh yeah, we added a new heat pump. So long story short, I think monitoring is a huge difference between the 2 systems. But again, it's like they have 2 different functions. One's as a lower cost option in a DC coupled environment. One, I think, provides some longer term value over the long term when you get into warranties and total system production. Please take a look. Thank you for joining. And please leave comments. Love to hear your input regarding the comparison here to the Tesla and the Enphase.